idea here is to understand that we all work in a world where user experience is no longer about just visual design. There's technology that exists in our world that helps support deliver UI, UX, and visual design is a part of that. And then equally on the development side of our world, that our software engineers are making user experience decisions while they work through their user flows as well. They're having to kind of wear multiple hats and think about both ends, but all centered around decisions we're making as a team on a daily basis about user experience. How does the user perceive what we do in the end? And that's what our goals are in most of our projects.
Our organization have started to leverage, especially to speak to more of the user experience. Like my organization is very student focused. So our president will start any leadership calls with a story around a student. So it's really refreshing to see leadership really focused on who that student, who that user is. And from there, it's really up to our team. So we have, 40 maybe Agile teams throughout the organization. Some of them are student facing, some of them are platform teams. And really it's up to those teams to really bring user experiences to life, whether it's a prospective student, a currently enrolled student, an alumni, faculty, kind of across the board. So really I came across a quote, and I want to say it's from Nielsen Norman Group, but user experience is everybody's responsibility. And that's really something we're adapting through the technologies and processes we've been utilizing.
Vincit's an agency style business model. So we contract projects through other companies. And one of the really powerful things about Vincit, I think, is that we do really focus hard on using, whether it's modern tech stacks, so using modern coding technologies, or modern technologies like Miro, Jira is pretty not as modern, but things like that still are very helpful. And we focus really hard on getting clients who are going to use those kind of things, who are going to use those modern technologies. So when we hand them off, they can find developers who are still familiar with those technologies and continue to improve on their product. If they choose to go another route, or if we keep building on it, all of our employees will be pretty familiar with those newer technologies.
But really what that means is, from a UI perspective, I'm trying to find the happy medium and the blend between web development and the technical aspects of that, content strategy, and how you make someone feel when they come to your website, and then SEO to make sure that you're findable. So really, I'm trying to build our team in a way where we're data informed through analytics and data and technology, but then also making sure that we're taking things into consideration like user intent and building really good user flows for any of our clients in the sites that we develop. So from a technology perspective, that's a tough sell. So I'm trying to find technologies that can help me really bridge the gap between bringing a technical discipline between how is this website technically built? Does it have everything that I need it? And then does it say the things that I need it to say? And is it going to help me grow where I need it to grow? And then thereafter, the fact our analytics team is layering in, how are people interacting with that? And what's the feedback that we're getting? And are people loyal, or are they just buying and leaving? So there's, for my job and my teams, there's a lot of really unique nuances that I feel like we've really just scratched the surface in terms of figuring out what technologies we use. BrightEdge is a really good tool that we found that kind of marries the technical aspect with content strategy and SEO, but I'm sure there's way more out there that we haven't quite explored yet.
We have a very powerful team. We collaborate using lots of different kinds of platforms. Miro board is one of them. We use Slack. We have a lot of collaborative tools that we use to talk to clients, or whether we talk to each other, sharing work. Right now we're designing in Figma, which as long as you've got a subscription, everybody can kind of be in there at the same time. There's times when I could be working on a project with another designer, and we're both in there, and he's working on a section and I'm working on a section, and we're on the phone on Slack, and we're going back and forth being like, okay, what font did you use? Okay, I need to do that. What size is that? Okay, this. And you just see the mouses go back and forth. So and then sometimes you see developers in there too, already starting to go ahead and plan the back-end code for what they're about to implement. And then kind of another thing that's interesting about our team is, because we are so small, we have a really tight relationship with every department within Vincit, Arizona. So there's a lot of talks with the developers on a daily basis about how they want to see something work and how you describe it, or even with the marketing team, how you're trying to envision what they're trying to do for maybe a landing page or some sort of advertisement or some social media. So it's really almost nice to have more of a family environment in this agency where we all kind of help each other out. And we all do the best that we can to deliver what we know about to each other, and then just build each other up and eventually, you know, build up the company as well. So I think user experience is the experience that a user has when they interact with your product. So as a user experience designer, you get to determine what that experience is. And because, you know, there's so many different kinds of ways to appeal to different people now. There's a lot of emotions and behaviors that everybody's looking at, hyper focused on at times, that there's augmented virtual reality, there's, you know, chatbots, there's different things. And so when you think about how we are tracking human behavior and the emotions that users have, I can only see this going so far where we can really create experiences for them. And maybe even just not even being designing an interface, because that's part of emotion and that's part of the experience, but even getting creative with the design strategy. You know, it doesn't have to be just because it's out there and it's good and there's other things that you can do doesn't mean that you have to limit yourself to what's already existing. Sometimes you just got to say like, oh, well, what if we did something like that? And just those tiny questions are the things that make things huge eventually, you know?
I agree with that. I think there's, in my world, I mean, a lot of what I do is focused on not just the customer acquisition and not just that conversion point, but it's what happens afterwards. And I feel like that's often sometimes something that gets overlooked in UI design and in design strategy. So you're designing and you're strategizing around getting the person to do that one thing that you need them to do, but then what happens after the fact? And I think Liz actually has a really good experience in terms of just like longevity. Like if you're working with a student and they're there for 4 or 5 years, that doesn't just end when they decide to be a student. It goes beyond that and it continues beyond that. And I think there's a lot of brands, I mean, even brands that I work with now, where they're an e-commerce brand and they're so focused on that conversion point, like get the customer, that they lose sight of what that feels like and what the emotions are after someone has purchased a product from you. So I hope that as we evolve, that there's more focus on the what happens next, because that's still an area where I feel like there is more to be explored, and there's really more that we can tap into from a behavior and an emotion standpoint as to why people are loyal to certain brands versus others, and what that experience is like after the actual point of purchase.
Yeah, I think the two categories for me would be kind of like less code and more data are kind of the two paths. So for more data, there's so many tools out there that allow us to track every single like individual user movement. So like whether they're clicking a button, we can track, there's a tool called Hotjar, Hotjar, that we can track exactly where a user's mouse goes, and we can track exactly where they click, and we can track their journey through the entire application. And there's other tools that do kind of similar things. And so that's extremely helpful for understanding maybe where a user is getting lost in a checkout journey or things of that nature. And then also on the less code side, there's like these tools are getting more mature and getting to a stage where you can use them for more like intensive applications, where they're low code tools that you can like piece together little blocks that almost like a UX designer who might not know a lot about individual coding languages, things of that nature, they can go in and build interfaces for certain applications and build the entire like data platform around it. A big tool for that's called Webflow, Webflow. And they have a lot of really powerful things, from accepting like form submissions to storing all sorts of data you could imagine. And a few years ago, those tools were still elementary and didn't have a whole lot of use. Like you could maybe design a marketing page, or you could design like a simple sort of landing page, but to build an actual application that's saving users' data, allowing them to log in, things of that nature, those tools are kind of getting close to getting to that point, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, I think for my organization, I've been there now for about 5 years, and it's kind of crazy how different each year has felt, from just starting out as a senior UX UI designer in marketing, but not working on anything relative to marketing, working on like our student portal or our application process, and then kind of working my way into this creative director role, where for the longest time, the organization didn't really have any idea what any of the teams were working on. Leadership would just be like, okay, these things are happening. And then we adopted Safe Agile, which I don't know who's familiar with that, but it was a way for the organization and leadership, especially, to have visibility into the work that teams were doing and, what they were spending money on. Why are all these people here in an organization? What exactly are they doing? So 2 days, every 10 weeks, teams would get in a room and like plot out the work that they had for the upcoming 10 weeks. So we did that for a while. And then lo and behold, there was kind of this revelation that, our teams are going to be closest to our customer. And how do we adopt a way for those teams to actually solve problems instead of leadership saying, here's your list of 50 things we have to prioritize for the next 10 weeks, but giving teams ownership, leadership leading with more of an objective, like, we need to increase our conversions on this page or something, or a website by 5%. Teams, go figure that out, figure out what problems you're going to solve and how we meet those objectives. So since January, maybe October, actually last year, we've been kind of working our way into more of this product-centric approach to allow those teams, those pods of devs, design leads, tech leads, product managers actually be assigned with the space or the journey or whatever within the platform that they would be responsible for to then meet those objectives. So I think it really kind of ties back to collaboration, and everyone's more or less a part of that strategy between that product manager, that design lead, and that tech lead. And you don't have like, okay, designer, go figure this out, but the product manager having an expertise, the tech lead having that expertise, and the design lead having that expertise to then come together to hear things differently and solve problems together. So it just kind of made me think of that evolution that we're going through. It's not revolutionary. Facebook's doing this, Google's doing this. You guys may be working in that way more or less, but a really big pivot for our organization to try to be innovative again, because kind of as the leading higher education brand for the past 45 years now, there's a lot of competition coming up, especially with COVID, online school. Okay, everyone's online now. So how do we reinvent ourselves to be more innovative going forward?
Yeah, it's all really great points. And I think the thing that I hear that really underscores a lot of it is that the collaboration of people is imperative to the evolution of what we're all doing, and that our understanding of tools is empowering us to know how we solve a problem. But even beyond that, when we think about how those things get adopted for some of us, it's our clients, for some of us, it's the organizations. But how do you take data and actually make that into insights and then turn that into actions, right? And I think we could all agree that that is the imperative step we have to take in our process, is actually there's tons of data out there, but who rationalizes it, and who's actually the expertise within a team that can rationalize that, turn it into insights? And I think the answer is it's a group of people, and it should be, because we all have different perspectives, we all have different outcomes, and we all contribute to the solution. So I think all of your answers are fantastic. I think the evolution of design, UX, development, all congregating together to come up with solutions is the way of the future. And it, like you said, it's not revolutionary, but it's where everybody's aligning to.
So my team's responsibility really is to make sure, so Pinnacle, just for context, spends over $350 million a year in advertising on behalf of our clients. And a large portion of that, probably 45 to 50%, is digital. So my team's responsibility is to make sure that some odd dollars is going to a website that's actually going to serve the hundreds of millions of dollars that you're spending justice when they get there. So if my team is overseeing a website, we really want to try to make sure that we're using, like you said, Sean, data and analytics to really on an ongoing basis analyze where are people dropping off, using Hotjar even, where are people looking on the site. I mean, we want to build these pages that are these giant single pages, and it sounds great from a design perspective, or from a user perspective, sometimes people are dropping off at the top quarter of the page and they're not even seeing any of the content that your team spent the last 6 months developing. So using tools like that really helps us gain some efficiencies for starters, so that we're not developing a bunch of content that nobody's listening to, but it also really helps us narrow down where the drop off is happening. So I'm supporting a team that is really like opening the floodgates to all of this traffic to our sites and making sure that it's a frictionless experience when they get there. So we're looking at everything from site speed to path to conversion to customer journey, and then also analyzing the post-conversion journey for loyalty and, you know, customer service and all of that to make sure that each little step of the way we have a data point to not just analyze, but to then communicate back to the client and communicate back to our design and to our dev team so that we have sort of that like full circle feedback, which I think is really important. I mean, you don't often get an analytics team that's actively meeting with your designers and with your developers to say, hey guys, you just built this awesome page, but nobody's converting on that page and nobody's reading the bottom half of that page. So we probably need to come back to the drawing board. It's actually made our conversations with our designers a little bit more cordial and a little bit less, you know, you can't tell me what my design looks like. So it's taken the subjectivity out of design, which I've really enjoyed because I'm much like some of my colleagues, I'm not a designer natively. I don't know how to develop. So I feel like I have just a unique perspective there.
That's a really good point. And, you know, I want to hear from Austin a little bit too on this subject of just when you're making decisions during the coding practices of user experience. So while you're working through the code, while you're just making decisions for the technology side of things, how often are you presented with a user experience decision point you have to make? And it may be one that you're going back to a designer to, or it may be one you're actually solving yourself. But in your work, compared to years ago, how often are you seeing this as a normal thing where you're actually thinking about design as part of your process?
Yeah, I would say almost daily because, on the team I work on, we have a pretty flat like structure as far as we still have our like project managers who are making sure everything's going right, but all the communication happens amongst like I'll talk directly to a designer if need be, talk directly to kind of breaking those barriers of having to go through like management to get to the designers and going back and forth, and that's been really helpful. Just like say you click a button and an action happens, showing like designers might show a screen, the next screen, but maybe they just lapsed on on like a success indicator or some sort of like loading state to show those things. So just getting like simple small things like that, from all the way to decisions that designers may have in mind that might make the development take an extra 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and they might not realize it. And so just being able to have that open communication is extremely helpful and has sped up my process a lot.
Yeah, I think if you would have asked clients or stakeholders 5 years ago to invest more money in a complete user experience process, they would have thought, that's just a bunch of fluff, make my website look good, get me out on the market right now. But I think that, you know, not just COVID and everybody working remote, but the internet in itself, I mean, any retailer probably has 8 different channels of, you know, ways that users interact with their brand and their purchases. So when you have that in mind and everything is digital, the entire idea about user experience, whether it comes from an app or their website or, I mean, there's all kinds of things now. So, you know, you can purchase a product at the same place in, you know, 8 different ways. So there's 8 different ways that a user is going to interact with all 8 of those channels. I'm just using a random number 8, but could be 8, could be more, could be less. But, you know, that's a lot of things to consider. And I think, you know, back then there weren't as many channels. Now we've got social media. Now we have all these different things. And I think that there is more emphasis on it now than ever before. And I think that's why they kind of are saying, okay, we'll do this time. We'll do this research.
Yeah, I kind of live in luxury as we have 2 senior UX researchers on staff that my team gets to work with all the time. So I feel like we went from maybe one like user study or so here and there, and now we've got like both of our researchers actively doing user studies like every week. I think we have some going on this week, someone will be doing one next week, and it's just kind of like continuous user research because we have so much to look at. I mean, between the 14 designers or 15, I can't even keep track right now, but between all those designers and things we have going on, we are very data driven and insight driven, and we want to hear from our customers. So now, like beyond even just senior UX researchers, it's like, okay, we don't want to spend time having these extensive user studies, like we go through these motions, we, get whatever data we can get, pull, synthesize, and then, okay, we design a thing, and then, okay, we put it through a user research study, which is more so validating or invalidating the work we've done. But what are those things we can do in between? So you're talking about Hotjar. I just saw Content Square, which we use, bought Hotjar, which is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll continue to leverage that, at least for our marketing website for phoenix.edu. But then there's like Usability Hub, user testing, like all those sorts of tools where you can, go along, kind of put some ideas together, get them out there so that you can start understanding if these are worth investing in or not. So really it's kind of, for us, like the collaboration, kind of the efficiencies of what we're going to create. Like our organization wants to move really fast, but we're also like, let's slow down, let's do the right thing for what our students are looking for. I lost my train of thought, but I'll stop there.
I can follow that a little bit. So yeah, it's really powerful, like on the front end to understand all the science and art behind the process of like creating your UX journeys. And then once you get to the development point, as developers, we also have some other tools that will do what's called like A/B testing, which will allow us, like maybe the designers had two designs that they thought were great and could be really impactful, and they weren't sure which would convert best or which would keep users engaged the longest. And so what we can do as developers, and there's 10, 20 tools that'll do this for you. You can roll out maybe your website to half the users in one form and roll it out to the other half of users in another form. So like a good example of that would be like Instagram. So they did like not showing the likes on the app. And so for a while they would roll that out to maybe 10, 20% of their user base, run some data around that, and leave the rest of the user base on the original app. And so you can kind of see insights there as well.
It's kind of a big strategy we've adopted too, is like we have our whole website live, right? But to be able to optimize it, you need to see how the new things are performing. So taking whatever's live now, putting it against one new thing or a new CTA or something to, we have apply now, but now we're like, oh, let's try ready to apply, because maybe they aren't quite, but how can we push them a little bit further towards clicking apply now?
Exactly.
But yeah.
I think so part of my role is running an analytics team, and some of that we do research, but some of that is using some of the tools that we have to our disposal. I'm looking for the things that annoy our customers, honestly, the things that when they go to a website or when they're logging into a backend system, make them say like, you know what, I'm out of here. Like it's just not worth it. So those are the things that it sounds dramatic, but like there is that moment for everybody on everything. It doesn't matter if you're a student, it doesn't matter if you're trying to buy a product, it doesn't matter if you're trying to manage your account or cancel a subscription. There is always a moment and a point of stoppature, basically, where it says, yeah, it's just not worth it for me. So I feel like my job is to try to eliminate that and to try to find what is the thing that annoys them the most about when they experience my brand, so that I can eliminate that point of friction for them and make that, instead of a point of annoyance, a point of, it's an opportunity to gain more loyalty at any point.
I agree. I think pain points are a big part, but for design, I would say, what's the goal? When I'm thinking about the end user, what's the goal? What's the goal? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to look at the big picture, or are we trying to look at what this product does? And there's two different things. And you can talk with organizations that want to launch a product, website, or application, and sometimes, you'll listen to what they say and how they want it to look, but you kind of there's a disconnect, because as much as you want to please the client, you actually have to empathize with the end user. And so when I think about design decisions that I'm making, I'm thinking about that person, because as a user experience or user interface designer, you are supposed to be, you're supposed to know everything about that product, right? You're creating their website, you're creating their application, you're creating something for them. I've never been a tax attorney, I've never done any of this stuff, but I'm supposed to be, incredibly qualified for that product that I'm delivering to them. So what I have to do is I have to put myself into the end user's shoes and kind of juggle the client and the end user at times?
I think so. When I started at University of Phoenix, and I always make well, anyway, I'm like, where are personas? So coming from the agency side, a lot of the teamwork that I was involved with or had, you know, at my disposal, it was like our teams were doing personas and customer journey maps, and you had all that information about that brand. And going to University of Phoenix, I'm like, all right, what are personas? Do we have a journey map? No? All right, well, they gave me some personas from like several years ago, and maybe they were still relevant, but I think that was a really awesome tool to have and continues to be. And we're going through this whole persona evolution again. But what was really interesting coming out of that is, and what I learned is our development teams that we had at the time, they didn't know who they were building anything for. Like, okay, it's a student, but who is the student? They're just like, this looks cool. What do you think? This works awesome. Like this, yeah, students will love this. But until we really had kind of this iteration of personas, which was 2 years ago, our teams really rallied around this persona, Rachel. So it bullets out her pain points, what's about her, Rachel, yeah. So anyway, so it talks about who this person is. And it's a data collection of all of the students that kind of rolled up into this generic sort of character. And it was really cool to see our dev teams adopt that because they made a hashtag Save Rachel. And so for a good 10 weeks, they were kind of going in and trying to figure out, what could they do to save Rachel, because she's a single mom, she has 2 kids, she has a full-time job, she's going back to school. So finally, like wrapping all those things up, then like, hey, okay, now we know who our user is, who our student is, and we can better empathize and figure out like, okay, what do we really need to do to save her time, in attending the university?
We've got refrigerators that will keep track of everything of your grocery list, that will sync to your phone, that will even take a picture when you're at the store to wonder if you missed that product or if you need that gallon of milk.
That's a good one. For sure.
I'm saving my lunch money for that one. Yeah, there's that. I mean, we already got watches that can, tell you to calm down if your heart rate goes up. We've already got cars, electric cars that. And then at the same time, all of these things are tracking your behavior and tailoring that experience to just you, or so you think, but just you. But I totally see that becoming incredible. Everybody looks at an interface, they feel like, oh, this is so pretty. But when it's easy to use, you don't ever think, oh, this is such a great experience. You don't even think about it. So you just get excited about the new things that you can do with it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's this, Google has a project called Solely right now. It's all about touchless interfaces. And that's something that I think has yet to really be fully explored. It really is based and surrounded on gestures and hand gestures using what's literally attached to your wrist and through their artificial intelligence. And I think what I've read about that project and everything that I've looked at is so fascinating. And I think we're really just at the beginnings of, we already talked about voice. We know that's there. We use Alexa, Siri, whoever we want to yell at when we're at home. But the touchless experience is something that is, I think, so cool. I think it's going to be awesome when we get there. So I'm excited for that evolution.
She said,
Did I steal your thunder?
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. I didn't have a great answer necessarily.
I
You
think
guys know
Austin
more
was
than
just
I do.
worried. He was like, how am I going to code all this?
Right.
I wish you could
I'm gonna
just
code the gesture.
take my mind and just code
Right.
it for me. Put it here and there.
I wish. It's not quite that talented.
Yeah, I
That day
think
never comes. For your sake.
Right.
yeah, for me, I think it just comes back to personalization. Like it feels so, I don't know, just very immersed into the social media space, but not quite fully immersed into maybe like the app or web space. I don't know. It's kind of what I think about. And then someday self-driving cars, which sounds like they're here with some of the Uber efforts and things like that, but that'll be interesting. I don't know if the light rail drives itself yet, but I could see that coming a bit someday.
Yeah, I think Arizona pioneered the Waymo, the company.
yeah.
And yeah, that's been quite an interesting thing to watch. But I agree. I mean, I personally am a huge proponent of the marrying of digital and physical together, to the point like you made, Lee, of you don't even realize it's happening. It's just happening. And you feel good about it. You feel good that you weren't annoyed. You feel good that you weren't bothered by some activity or thing you had to do, some thing you had to click or push. So I do, and I see that both technologists as software engineers and user experience designers and strategists on the business side of just making sure we're challenging our customers and our leadership. I like challenging our leadership too, to think a little bit differently than traditional means.